The smell of old books and stale coffee had become my constant companion. Every breath I took in the dim basement of Chicago's Thornfield Library carried that scent, mixed with the faint mustiness of forgotten manuscripts that hadn't seen daylight in decades. My fingers ached from cataloging donation boxes, each movement sending a dull throb through my wrists as I sorted through yet another collection of romance novels someone's grandmother had decided to pass on to the world. I paused to stretch my back, feeling the familiar tightness that had nothing to do with the physical labor and everything to do with the secret I carried. 29 years, 11 months, and 16 days of playing it safe, of being the quiet girl who never made waves, and here I was, about to turn 30 in the most predictable way possible. Alone, in a basement, surrounded by books that other people had loved and abandoned. Sarah, my supervisor, appeared at the top of the stairs, her sensible heels clicking against the worn wood. "Claire, honey, you've been down there for 4 hours. Take a break, get some air." Her voice carried that particular blend of concern and pity that made my skin crawl. She knew. Everyone knew. Quiet Claire Bennett, the librarian who ate lunch alone, who never went to happy hours, who had somehow made it 3 decades without ever really living. "I'm fine," I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. "Just want to finish this last box." "It's your birthday tomorrow," Sarah insisted, descending a few steps so I could see her kind face properly. "You should be planning something fun, not suffocating down here with dust mites and dead people's book collections." I managed a smile that felt as fragile as old paper. "I am planning something. There's this new bar that opened in River North. Exclusive. I heard they make drinks that cost more than my rent." Sarah's eyebrows shot up, disappearing behind her severe bangs. "You? At a bar? An exclusive bar?" She said it like I'd announced plans to climb Everest in my sensible flats and cardigan. "Even librarians turn 30, I said, forcing brightness into my tone. "And I'm tired of being the person everyone expects me to be." What I didn't tell Sarah was that I'd spent the last 3 months secretly saving up for this one night. One single night where I wouldn't be invisible. Claire, boring Claire. Claire who still blushed when someone made eye contact. I'd researched the place obsessively. The Crimson Velvet. A speakeasy-style bar tucked behind a butcher shop front. The kind of place where beautiful people went to be seen by other beautiful people. Where a simple cocktail required a password and cost $50. I'd bought a dress. A real dress. Not from a thrift store or clearance rack, but from an actual boutique, where the saleswoman had looked at me with thinly veiled surprise when I'd asked to try on something daring. It was burgundy silk, with a neckline that suggested without screaming, and I'd practiced walking in the heels I'd bought to match until my feet bled. Tonight, I was going to be someone else. Just for a few hours. The rest of the workday crawled by with excruciating slowness. I cataloged books, answered reference questions from elderly patrons who still preferred encyclopedias to Google, and tried not to think about how drastically my life was about to change. Not because of one night at a bar, but because of the decision I'd made 3 weeks ago. The decision I couldn't unmake, even if I wanted to. By the time I finally left the library, twilight had settled over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet. The October air carried a bite that made me pull my thin coat tighter. But underneath, I felt warm with anticipation and terror in equal measure. My apartment greeted me with its usual silence. 1 bedroom, kitchen barely big enough for a single person to turn around in, and a bathroom where I could sit on the toilet and wash my hands in the sink simultaneously. 3 years in Chicago, and this was all I had to show for it. But tonight, none of that mattered. I showered until my skin turned pink, washing away the smell of old books and dust. Applied makeup with a hand that trembled slightly, following a YouTube tutorial I'd watched 17 times. The dress slid over my body like a secret, transforming my reflection into someone I barely recognized. My dark hair, usually pulled back in a sensible bun, hung loose around my shoulders. The wine-colored lipstick I'd chosen made my lips look fuller, my face somehow bolder. I stared at myself in the mirror, this stranger wearing my face, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Claire. Let's do something stupid." The crimson velvet was exactly as I'd imagined it, and nothing like it at all. The password I'd obtained through careful online research got me past the first door, through a dim hallway that smelled of expensive leather and wood smoke, and into a space that seemed to exist outside of time. Jazz played softly from invisible speakers. Crystal chandeliers cast pools of golden light across intimate tables and plush velvet booths. The bar itself stretched along one wall, all gleaming mahogany and bottles that probably cost more than I made in a month. I felt every eye turn toward me as I entered, or maybe that was just paranoia. The other patrons looked like they belonged here, like luxury was their natural habitat. Women in dresses that cost more than my car, men in suits tailored so precisely they might as well be second skins. And then there was me, playing dress-up, my heart hammering so loud I was certain everyone could hear it. "First time?" a voice asked, and I turned to find the most beautiful man I'd ever seen standing beside me. Not handsome in a conventional way, but striking. Dark hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and intense eyes. He wore his bartender's vest like armor, white shirt sleeves rolled to reveal forearms that suggested he did more than just mix drinks. "That obvious?" I managed, trying to ignore the flush creeping up my neck. His smile was kind, not mocking. "Only to me. I'm Connor. What can I make for you?" "Something that costs exactly $53, I said, and then immediately wanted to disappear into the floor. What kind of person specified the exact price? But Connor just laughed, a genuine sound that made something warm unfold in my chest. "A woman who knows her budget. I like that. How about a boulevard of broken dreams? It's 52, and I'll throw in the extra $1 with my charm." "Sold," I said, sliding onto a bar stool that probably cost more than my entire apartment's furniture combined. I watched him work, mesmerized by the precise movements, the casual confidence with which he commanded his space. He made conversation easy, asking questions that made me feel interesting rather than interrogated. "What brought me here?" "My birthday. Tomorrow, technically, but I was celebrating tonight." "What did I do?" "Librarian." "No, not boring at all," he insisted when I made the joke before he could. "Did I come here alone?" That last question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibilities. "Yes," I said, meeting his eyes. "I came alone." Something shifted in the atmosphere then, a subtle electricity that made my skin feel too tight. Connor leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear over the jazz. "I get off in 20 minutes. Would you like to wait? Or should I make you another drink?" This was it. The moment where sensible Claire would thank him politely and leave. Where invisible Claire would assume he was just being nice, not actually interested. But I wasn't that Claire tonight. "I'll wait," I breathed. 20 minutes became both an eternity and an instant. I nursed my cocktail, hyper-aware of Connor's presence behind the bar, the way his eyes kept finding mine across the space. Other bartenders came to relieve him, and then he was beside me, no longer in his vest, just the white shirt and dark pants that somehow looked more intimate than his uniform. "There's a private room upstairs," he said, his hand finding the small of my back. "Quieter. We could talk." I knew what he meant. I wasn't that naive. And for the first time in my carefully controlled life, I didn't care about consequences or tomorrow or anything beyond this moment. "Show me," I said. The private room was all shadows and velvet, a space designed for discretion and sin. Connor's lips found mine before the door even fully closed, and I kissed him back with a desperation that surprised us both. He tasted like mint and something darker, and his hands on my waist felt like permission to be someone else. Someone bold and reckless and alive. I lost myself in sensation, in the feeling of being wanted, of being seen. His fingers traced patterns on my skin that made me forget to breathe. His mouth found places that made me understand why people wrote poetry about desire. And then, over his shoulder, I saw him. Sitting in the shadows of the room, a man I hadn't noticed when we'd entered. Perfectly still, watching us with eyes that gleamed like a predator's in the dim light. He held a glass of amber liquid, but hadn't lifted it to his lips. Just sat there, observing, as if we were theater staged for his entertainment. I froze. Connor felt it immediately, pulling back. "What's wrong?" "There's someone here," I whispered, my voice shaking. Connor turned, and I felt his body go rigid. "Mr. Benedetti, I didn't realize you were using this room." "Clearly," the man said, his voice carrying a thick Italian accent that turned the simple word into something dangerous. "You didn't realize many things, Connor. Or should I call you by your real name? Agent Morrison?" The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Connor's hand fell away from my waist, and when I looked at his face, I saw something new there. Fear, carefully masked, but unmistakable. "Agent Morrison has been working very hard to earn my trust," the man called Benedetti continued, rising from his chair with the fluid grace of someone comfortable with violence. 6 months undercover, mixing my drinks, listening to my conversations, passing information to his handlers at the FBI. All very impressive, except he got sloppy. He was closer now, close enough that I could see the details of his face. Handsome in a brutal way, with a scar running from his left eyebrow into his hairline. His suit probably cost more than everything I owned combined, tailored to hide what I suspected was a weapon beneath his jacket. "And you," he said, those predatory eyes fixing on me. "Who are you, little mouse? Another agent, his handler, or just unfortunate collateral?" "I'm nobody," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just a librarian. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know anything." His laugh was cold, mirthless. "A librarian. How quaint." He circled us slowly, and I noticed for the first time that the door we'd entered through was now blocked by 2 men I definitely hadn't seen before. Large men, with the kind of build that came from serious gym time and probably serious violence. "Please," Connor said, his voice tight. "She's telling the truth. She has nothing to do with this. Let her go." "Let her go," Benedetti repeated, as if testing the words. "Tell me, Agent Morrison, do you care about this girl? Did you plan this encounter, or was she simply in the wrong place at the wrong time?" Connor's jaw worked. "I don't know her. She's innocent." "Innocent," Benedetti mused, moving even closer to me. I could smell his cologne now, something expensive and dark. "But she kissed you. Quite enthusiastically, I might add. And she came to my establishment, wearing a dress designed to catch attention. To catch my attention, perhaps?" "No," I said desperately. "I didn't even know you existed. I just wanted to celebrate my birthday. One night where I wasn't invisible. That's all." Something flickered across his face, too fast to read. "Your birthday. How old, little mouse?" 30. Tomorrow." 30, he repeated softly, and then his hand shot out, gripping my chin with surprising gentleness, forcing me to meet his eyes. They were dark brown, almost black in the dim light, and held depths that terrified me. "And you chose to celebrate by kissing a man you just met? How very bold of you, librarian." I wanted to pull away, but his grip, while gentle, was unyielding. "I made a mistake," I whispered. "Yes," he agreed. "You did. The question now is what I should do about it." The basement room Benedetti's men escorted me to smelled of cigarettes and old concrete. Not the romantic library mustiness I'd grown accustomed to, but something harsher, more honest about its decay. Connor, Agent Morrison, I corrected myself bitterly, had been taken somewhere else, separated from me the moment we'd descended the narrow staircase behind the bar's kitchen. The last I'd seen of him was his face, pale and stricken, mouthing, "I'm sorry," before a door slammed between us. Now I sat in a metal folding chair that was bolted to the floor, my beautiful burgundy dress already creased and losing its magic, transforming back into what it really was, a costume that hadn't fooled anyone. The room had no windows, just bare walls painted an institutional beige that had probably been white once, decades ago. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows that made everything look like a crime scene photograph, which, I supposed, it might become. The door opened and Benedetti entered alone, carrying 2 bottles of water and a leather folder. He'd removed his jacket, revealing a shoulder holster that confirmed my suspicion about the weapon. The white dress shirt he wore was pristine, rolled to his elbows in a way that seemed calculated to appear casual while remaining entirely intimidating. "Drink," he said, setting 1 bottle in front of me. Not a request. An order. I stared at it, my mind racing through every thriller I'd ever read. Drugged water. Poisoned water. Water that would make me compliant or unconscious or dead. My hands remained in my lap, trembling slightly. Benedetti sighed, a sound of infinite patience tested, and opened the bottle himself. He took a long drink, maintaining eye contact, then set it back down. "Better? Or do you think I've developed immunity to whatever poison you imagine?" "Why would you poison me?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "If you wanted me dead, you'd have done it upstairs." A smile ghosted across his lips, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Smart little mouse. "You're right. If I wanted you dead, you would already be decorating the Chicago River. The fact that you're here, breathing, drinking water, means I want something else." "What?" I forced myself to pick up the bottle, if only because my throat was so dry I could barely swallow. The water was cold, clean, and blessedly normal. He opened the leather folder, spreading several photographs across the table between us. My stomach dropped. They were pictures of me. Dozens of them, leaving my apartment building, walking into the library, buying coffee at the cafe 3 blocks from work, grocery shopping, living my quiet, invisible life, except someone had been watching every moment. "You've been under surveillance for 3 weeks, Benedetti said, his voice matter of fact. "Since the moment Agent Morrison made contact with you at that coffee shop on South Street. You thought it was chance? A handsome stranger spilling his latte, apologizing profusely, insisting on buying you a replacement?" The memory came rushing back. Connor, flustered and charming, his smile apologetic as he dabbed at the coffee stain on my sleeve. We'd talked for 20 minutes. He'd asked where I worked, what I liked to do, whether I'd ever been to the Crimson Velvet. I'd thought it was serendipity, romance even, the universe finally throwing me a bone on the eve of my 30th birthday. "It was all planned," I whispered, the betrayal settling into my bones like cold. "Every second," Benedetti confirmed. "Morrison has been trying to get close to me for months. My usual bartender quit, or rather, was persuaded to quit, and Morrison slid into his place with impeccable references that my people should have caught were fabricated. He's been listening, watching, waiting for me to slip up, to say something incriminating within earshot. But I'm careful, Miss Bennett. Very careful." He knew my name. Of course he knew my name. He probably knew everything about me. "Then tonight," he continued, leaning back in his chair with the ease of someone completely in control, "he brought you to my establishment, to my private room, kissing you where I specifically go to conduct business, to observe, to remain unseen. making sure I would see you. See him with you. Why do you think that is? I don't know, I said honestly. My mind was spinning, trying to catch up. Maybe he didn't know you were there. Morrison always knows where I am. That's his job. No, little mouse. He brought you there for me to see. The question is why? Are you his partner? His insurance policy? Or his attempt to make me lower my guard by appearing distracted by a beautiful woman? The word beautiful fell from his lips like it meant nothing, like it was simple fact, rather than something that made my heart skip, despite the terror coursing through me. I'm not anything to him, I insisted, leaning forward. I told you, I didn't even know his real name. I'm just a librarian who made a stupid decision on her birthday. I'm nobody. I don't know anything about your business or the FBI or any of this. Please, you have to believe me. Benedetti studied me with those dark, unreadable eyes. I do believe you, he said finally. Or rather, I believe you think you're telling the truth. But Morrison is clever. He might have hidden something with you. Information, evidence. Something he knew my people would find if he kept it himself. I don't have anything, I said desperately. You can search my apartment, my locker at work, my car. I have nothing. I already have, he said simply. While you've been here, my people have been very thorough. Your apartment is quite sad, by the way. No decorations except a single plant that's dying. No photographs on the walls. Your refrigerator contains yogurt, wilted lettuce, and a bottle of wine you opened 3 weeks ago and never finished. You live like a ghost, Miss Bennett. The casual invasion of my privacy should have made me angry, but instead, I felt only shame. He'd seen how pathetic my existence was. The empty life I'd been trying to escape for one night. Nothing in your locker either, he continued. Though your colleague Sarah keeps a bottle of vodka in hers, which I find amusing. Your car is 13 years old and barely runs. The check engine light has been on for 8 months. You're $300 behind on your rent, 2 months behind on your student loans, and you have exactly $47 in your checking account after tonight's adventure. Tell me, little mouse, how did you afford that dress? The accuracy of his information was chilling. I saved, I whispered. For 3 months. I wanted one night where I felt like someone else. And did you? Feel like someone else? I looked at him then, really looked at him. Beyond the obvious danger, the weapon at his side, the casual way he discussed invading every corner of my life. His face was handsome in a harsh way, like marble carved by an angry sculptor. The scar on his eyebrow suggested violence in his past, but his hands, resting on the table, were steady, confident. These were hands that had hurt people, probably killed people, yet they held the water bottle with surprising delicacy. For about 20 minutes, I admitted, before it all went to hell. Something flickered across his face again, almost like amusement. Hell. Yes, I suppose that's accurate. He stood abruptly, gathering the photographs. You're free to go, Miss Bennett. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. What? You're free to go, he repeated, moving to the door. You're exactly what you appear to be. An unfortunate woman who made the mistake of trusting Agent Morrison. You have nothing I need, and killing you would serve no purpose except to bring more FBI attention to my establishments. I should have been relieved, should have stood up and run for the door before he changed his mind. But something in his tone, in the way he wasn't quite looking at me, made me hesitate. There's a condition, isn't there? I asked quietly. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. Perceptive. Yes, there's a condition. You don't speak to the FBI. You don't file a police report. You don't tell anyone about tonight, about this place, about me. You return to your sad little apartment and your dying plant and your job cataloging books that no one reads. You forget this ever happened. And if I don't? Now he did look at me, and the coldness in his eyes made my breath catch. Then you won't have to worry about your rent being late, Miss Bennett, or your student loans, or anything else, ever again. Because you'll be dead, and so will Sarah with her hidden vodka, and anyone else you might have told about tonight. I don't make threats. I make promises. The casual way he included Sarah, who had nothing to do with any of this, who'd only ever been kind to me, made something snap inside me. I stood up, my legs shaking but my voice steady. You're a monster, I said. Yes, he agreed simply. I am. The question is, are you smart enough to stay away from monsters? Or are you the type who thinks they can be saved? Before I could answer, the door opened and one of his men appeared. Boss, we have a problem. Benedetti's expression darkened. What kind of problem? Morrison's handler is here, demanding to see the girl. Says if she's not produced in the next 10 minutes, they're coming in with a warrant. A warrant for what? Benedetti's voice was dangerously soft. This is a legitimate business. They have no cause. Suspicion of kidnapping. Someone must have seen us bringing her down here. Benedetti's jaw tightened, and I saw real anger flash across his face for the first time. Not at me, but at the situation. At Morrison for bringing this chaos into his controlled world. Bring Morrison here, he ordered. Now. The man disappeared, and Benedetti turned back to me. It seems, little mouse, that you're more valuable than either of us thought. The FBI doesn't mobilize this quickly unless Morrison told them you mattered, which means he lied to me upstairs. He does care about you, or he wants me to think he does. I barely know him, I protested. Yet here are federal agents threatening to raid my establishment over you. Interesting. He moved closer, and I fought the urge to back away. New deal, Miss Bennett. You're going to walk out of here with me. You're going to tell the FBI that you came here of your own free will, that you're unharmed, and that you want them to leave. You're going to make this problem disappear. And if I don't? His hand moved so fast I barely saw it, gripping my wrist and pulling me close. Not painfully, but firmly enough that I understood I had no choice. If you don't, I let them take you. And then I let them discover that you've been receiving payments from one of my shell companies for the past 3 weeks. $5,000 deposited into an account I opened in your name. It will look like you've been working with Morrison all along, like you're an FBI informant. And when that information gets out, and it will get out, my enemies will assume you know things, dangerous things. They'll come for you, and I won't stop them. In fact, I'll help them find you. The room spun. You're framing me. I'm protecting myself, he corrected. You have a choice. Play along, and I forget you exist. Refuse, and you become a liability I eliminate. What will it be? The door opened again, and Connor was shoved inside, his lip bleeding, his hands zip-tied in front of him. His eyes found mine immediately, full of guilt and fear. Claire? He started, but Benedetti silenced him with a look. Agent Morrison, your handler is upstairs making demands. I'm inclined to give you to them. After all, what's one federal agent more or less? But Miss Bennett here is going to tell them a very interesting story about how she came here willingly, about how there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Aren't you, little mouse? I looked between them. Connor, who'd used me. Benedetti, who was now threatening me. 2 different types of trap, and I'd walked into both with my eyes closed. Say yes, Connor whispered. Claire, please. If they raid this place, people will die. Benedetti's men, federal agents, innocent bystanders. Just tell them you're okay. Listen to the agent, Benedetti said, his voice almost gentle. Be smart. Stay alive. Go back to your quiet life. But I wasn't that Claire anymore. That Claire had died the moment I'd seen Benedetti watching from the shadows. This Claire, standing in a basement room with a mob boss and an FBI agent, both trying to use her, both certain she'd comply. This Claire was done being invisible. "I'll talk to them," I said, meeting Benedetti's eyes. "But I want something in return." His eyebrow rose. "You want something? You're not exactly in a position to negotiate." "Neither are you," I pointed out, surprised by my own audacity. "You need this to go away quietly. That makes me valuable. So here's my price. I want the money. The $5,000 in that fake account. Real money, not a frame job. And I want assurance that neither you nor anyone working for you will come near me, my apartment, or anyone I know ever again." Benedetti stared at me for a long moment, and I couldn't read his expression. Then, impossibly, he laughed. A real laugh, full of genuine amusement. "Ambitious little mouse," he said. "You threaten me while standing in my basement, surrounded by my men, with proof that you're either an informant or an idiot. And you demand payment for your silence. I almost admire it. Is that a yes?" He leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. "It's a maybe. First, convince the FBI. Then we'll discuss your price. And Miss Bennett, don't ever threaten me again. Next time, I won't find it charming." He stepped back and gestured to his men. "Take her upstairs. Make sure she looks properly unharmed. Agent Morrison stays here." "Claire." Connor tried again, but I didn't look at him as the men escorted me toward the door. I'd spent 30 years being invisible, being safe, being boring. In one night, I'd kissed a stranger, been watched by a mob boss, been threatened and framed and turned into something I didn't recognize. And somehow, impossibly, I was walking toward a group of FBI agents about to lie through my teeth to protect a criminal. My hands were still shaking, but when I caught my reflection in the grimy mirror by the stairs, I saw something new in my eyes. Not fear, though that was there too. Something sharper. Something that had woken up and refused to go back to sleep. Maybe this was what being alive felt like. Maybe this was what I'd been looking for when I'd put on that burgundy dress and walked into the crimson velvet. If so, I'd gotten exactly what I wished for, and I was terrified of what would come next. The FBI agents waiting upstairs looked exactly like I'd imagined from countless movies and procedural dramas. Dark suits, serious expressions, and an air of authority that seemed to fill the narrow hallway behind the Crimson Velvet's kitchen. There were 4 of them, 2 men and 2 women, all studying me with the kind of intense scrutiny that made me want to check if I had something on my face. The woman who stepped forward first had short blonde hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Bennett, I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen. Are you all right? Have you been harmed in any way?" Behind me, I felt Benedetti's presence like a physical weight. He hadn't touched me since we'd left the basement, but he didn't need to. His men flanked us, a silent reminder of what would happen if I said the wrong thing. And somewhere in my mind, I kept seeing that fabricated bank account, the $5,000 that would make me look complicit, guilty, dead. "I'm fine," I said, and was surprised to hear my voice come out steady. "There's been a misunderstanding." Agent Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. "A misunderstanding? Miss Bennett, we have reason to believe you were brought here against your will, that you may be in danger." "I came here on my own," I said, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. "It's my birthday. I wanted to celebrate. I met someone at the bar, Connor, and we went to a private room, that's all." "Connor Morrison is a federal agent working undercover," Chen said carefully, watching my reaction. "Did you know that?" I let genuine shock cross my face. Not difficult, since I was still processing the betrayal. "No. He told me he was a bartender. We just met tonight." "And Mr. Benedetti?" She gestured toward the man standing behind me. "How do you know him?" "I don't. I didn't even know he was there until... I paused, pretending to be embarrassed. Until he interrupted us. I was mortified. He said the room was reserved, that we shouldn't be there. He was actually very polite about it. His staff brought me down to the office to wait while they sorted things out. That's all. It was a terrible lie, full of holes that any competent investigator would see through immediately. But Agent Chen wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at Benedetti, and the calculation in her eyes suggested she knew exactly what game we were playing. "Mr. Benedetti," she said coolly, "would you mind if Miss Bennet and I spoke privately?" "Not at all," Benedetti replied, his voice all smooth civility. "Though I should mention that Miss Bennet is free to leave whenever she wishes. As I told your agent, this is a simple misunderstanding. No one here has any desire for trouble with federal authorities." The emphasis on "your agent" carried an edge that made Chen's jaw tighten. "Agent Morrison will be leaving with us." "Of course. I've already asked my staff to escort him up. He's unharmed, though I'm afraid there was a brief altercation when he became agitated. My men were simply defending themselves." As if on cue, Connor appeared at the top of the basement stairs, flanked by two of Benedetti's security. His lip was split, and a bruise was forming on his cheekbone, but he was walking under his own power. His eyes found mine immediately, full of questions I couldn't answer. "Claire," he said, pulling away from the guards. "Are you sure you're okay?" Before I could answer, Chen cut in. "Agent Morrison, stand down. Miss Bennet has stated she's here voluntarily, and that no crime has been committed." Her tone suggested she didn't believe a word of it, but her hands were tied by my statement. "That's ridiculous," Connor protested. "Claire, tell them what really happened. Tell them..." "Tell them what?" I interrupted, and the sharpness in my voice surprised us both. "That I came to a bar, kissed a stranger who lied about who he was, and got caught by the owner? What exactly do you want me to say? Connor? Or should I call you Agent Morrison?" The hurt that flashed across his face was genuine, and for a moment I felt guilty. But then I remembered him spilling coffee on me 3 weeks ago, remembered every chance encounter that had led to tonight, and the guilt evaporated. "We had good intel that you were in danger," Connor said quietly. "I was trying to protect you. By using me as bait." The words came out before I could stop them. Too honest, too revealing. I saw Benedetti shift behind me, heard the intake of breath that suggested I'd confirmed something he'd suspected. Agent Chen's expression sharpened. "Miss Bennet, if Agent Morrison involved you in an operation without your knowledge or consent, that's a serious breach of protocol. You have every right to file a complaint. And if Mr. Benedetti or his associates have threatened you in any way, we can provide protection." I almost laughed. Protection, as if the FBI could protect me from a man who'd had me under surveillance for weeks without anyone noticing, who'd fabricated evidence that would paint me as an informant, who'd threatened not just me, but Sarah, innocent Sarah, with her secret vodka and her kind concern. "No one threatened me," I said firmly. "And I don't want to file any complaints. I just want to go home, forget this night ever happened, and pretend I never met any of you." The last part was directed at Connor, and I saw him flinch. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what I was feeling. Chen studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, Miss Bennet. If you're certain you're safe and here of your own free will, we can't force you to come with us. But I'm going to give you my card." She pulled out a business card and pressed it into my hand. "If you change your mind, if you remember anything, or if you feel unsafe at any point, you call me immediately, day or night. Understood?" I took the card, feeling the weight of Benedetti's gaze on the back of my neck. "Understood." "Mr. Benedetti," Chen said, her voice hardening, "this establishment will be under increased scrutiny moving forward. I'd advise you to keep your nose clean." "It's always clean, Agent Chen," Benedetti replied smoothly. "I run a legitimate business. You're welcome to visit any time. Though I recommend making a reservation. We're quite popular." The tension in the hallway was thick enough to choke on. Chen gestured to her team, and they began moving toward the exit, Connor between them. He looked back at me one more time, his expression pleading. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. I looked away. When the FBI had finally left, the hallway fell silent, except for the distant sound of jazz still playing in the bar above. Benedetti's men drifted away, returning to their posts, until it was just the two of us standing in the dim corridor. "Well done, little mouse," Benedetti said quietly. "Very convincing. Almost made me believe you." "What now?" I asked, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept me sharp during the confrontation was draining away, leaving me shaky and hollow. "Now we discuss your demands." He gestured toward a door I hadn't noticed before. "My office. Unless you'd prefer to have this conversation in the basement." "Your office is fine," I said, following him through the door and up a narrow staircase. His office was nothing like I'd expected. No dark wood paneling or imposing desk. Instead, it was surprisingly minimal. Modern furniture, clean lines, and one wall entirely covered with books. Real books. Old books. The kind I spent my days cataloging. I found myself drawn to them automatically, reading the spines. First editions of Dante, Machiavelli, Calvino, all in Italian. "You read?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Is that so surprising?" He moved to a small bar in the corner, pouring himself a measure of whiskey. "You think monsters don't appreciate literature? I think most criminals don't own first edition copies of the Divine Comedy. Most criminals aren't me." He poured a second glass and offered it to me. When I hesitated, he sighed. "If I wanted to drug you, Miss Bennett, I would have done it already. Consider this a birthday drink. You're 30 now. Congratulations on surviving." I took the glass, mainly because my hands needed something to hold. The whiskey burned going down, but in a good way, warming the cold knot in my stomach. "The $5,000, Benedetti said, settling into one of the chairs and gesturing for me to sit. "You want it real, not fabricated. That's your price for tonight's performance?" "Yes." "Interesting. Most people in your position would want protection, or distance, or assurance that I'll never contact them again. You want money? Why?" I thought about lying, about making up something noble or smart. But I was tired of lies, even my own. Because I'm $300 behind on rent. Because my car is dying and I can't afford to fix it. Because I've spent 30 years being careful and responsible and following every rule, and I have nothing to show for it except debt and a dying plant and a job that barely pays enough to survive. $5,000 won't solve all my problems, but it would give me breathing room. Time to figure out what comes next. "What comes next?" he repeated thoughtfully. "And what do you think comes next for you, little mouse?" "I don't know," I admitted. A few hours ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life would look like. Boring, predictable, safe. Now, I gestured helplessly. Now I've lied to the FBI, made deals with a mob boss, and apparently been under surveillance for weeks without realizing it. So I genuinely have no idea what comes next. Benedetti swirled his whiskey, studying me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "I'm going to tell you a story, Miss Bennett, and then you're going to make a choice." "What kind of story?" "The kind that explains why I am the way I am, why I do what I do, and why tonight could have ended very differently if you were anyone else." I wanted to tell him I didn't care, that I just wanted my money and to never see him again. But something in his voice, a note of vulnerability I hadn't heard before, made me stay silent. 10 years ago, he began. I was married. Her name was Lucia. Beautiful, intelligent, fierce. Everything I wasn't supposed to want and exactly what I needed. We'd been together for 3 years when she got pregnant. I was terrified and overjoyed in equal measure. I wanted to give her everything: safety, stability, a life away from what I'd built. He paused, taking a long drink. There was a federal agent, not so different from your Connor, ambitious, determined to bring me down. He approached Lucia, told her I was a monster, that she was in danger, that her baby was in danger. He offered her witness protection if she'd testify against me. My stomach tightened, sensing where this was going. She refused, Benedetti continued, his voice flat now, emotionless. She told me about it immediately. We laughed about it, actually. Laughed at the idea that some government agent thought he could break us apart. 2 days later, she was dead. Car bomb. Meant for me, but I'd taken a different vehicle that morning. She died instantly. The baby survived long enough for them to deliver her via emergency cesarean, but she lived only 4 hours. I held her for every minute. Watched her die in my arms because I couldn't protect her. The silence that followed was suffocating. I didn't know what to say, what response would be adequate for that kind of loss. The agent, I whispered. Did you find him? Yes. He's in prison now, serving life for corruption and manslaughter. Turns out he'd been working with a rival organization, feeding them information. He'd told them about my schedule, about Lucia. He might as well have placed the bomb himself. Benedetti's fingers tightened around his glass. I couldn't kill him. That would have been too easy. But I made sure he'd spend every day for the rest of his life knowing what he'd done. Knowing he killed an innocent woman and a baby because of his ambition. He looked at me then, and I saw something raw in his eyes. Pain that time hadn't healed, only buried. So, when I saw you tonight, he continued, kissing an undercover federal agent in my private room, do you know what my first thought was? That history was repeating itself, that Morrison had found another innocent woman to use, to put in danger, to sacrifice for his case. And I thought, not again. Never again. Is that why you didn't kill me? I asked quietly. Because I reminded you of her? No, he said simply. I didn't kill you because you looked me in the eye and called me a monster. Because you demanded payment instead of mercy. Because you're not like Lucia at all. She was soft, gentle, believed the best in people. You're harder, smarter. You see the world as it is, not as you wish it would be. That's why you'll survive. He stood, moving to his desk and pulling out a leather checkbook. $5,000, as promised. Consider it payment for services rendered. You saved me from an FBI raid and made Morrison's handler look foolish in the process. That has value. He wrote the check with precise, elegant handwriting and held it out to me. I took it, half expecting it to disintegrate in my fingers like something from a dream. One more thing, he said as I stood to leave. The surveillance on you stops tonight. My men will disappear. You'll return to your quiet life, your library, your dying plant. But Miss Bennett, Claire, if you ever need anything, if Morrison or his people try to retaliate, if you find yourself in trouble, you call this number. He handed me a card with nothing on it but a phone number. No name, no address. Why would you help me? I asked, confused. Because you're the first person in 10 years who's looked at me and seen exactly what I am without flinching, without trying to save me or change me or justify me. You called me a monster, and you were right. But even monsters can appreciate honesty, and brave librarians who negotiate with mob bosses on their 30th birthday. He walked me to the door, his hand on the small of my back again. That same gesture Connor had used hours ago, but which felt completely different now. Not possessive, but oddly protective. "Happy birthday, Claire," Benedetti said quietly. "Try not to make any more deals with criminals. You're terrible at it." "I got $5,000, I pointed out. "You got $5,000 and a direct line to a mob boss. Trust me, little mouse, you lost this negotiation. You just don't know it yet." The night air hit me like a slap when I finally stepped outside. Cold, clean, real. I stood on the street corner, a check for $5,000 in one hand and a card with a mysterious phone number in the other, and realized I had no idea how to get home. My purse was still in my apartment. I had no phone, no wallet, no keys. A black car pulled up beside me, and the window rolled down. One of Benedetti's men, the one who'd searched my apartment earlier. "Boss said to drive you home," he said gruffly. "Get in." I should have refused. Should have walked to a police station or called someone, anyone. But I was tired and confused and still processing everything that had happened. So I got in the car. We drove through Chicago in silence, the city lights blurring past the window. When we reached my building, the man handed me my purse, my keys, everything I'd left behind. "How did you—" I started. "Boss has copies made," he said, as if this were perfectly normal. "For your safety. Don't worry, we'll return them. You won't even know we were here." "You're returning them?" I repeated. "You mean you're still in my apartment?" He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Just cleaning up the search, making sure everything's back where it belongs. We'll be gone in 10 minutes. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, half expecting to find it ransacked. Instead, everything was exactly as I'd left it, except cleaner. Someone had done my dishes, watered my dying plant, even made my bed with hospital corners I could never achieve. A note sat on my kitchen counter in that same elegant handwriting from the check. "Happy birthday. Try to be more careful. CB." I sank onto my freshly made bed, still wearing the burgundy dress that had started all of this, and stared at the check and the card and the note. Evidence that tonight had really happened. That I hadn't imagined the entire surreal nightmare. My reflection in the mirror across the room showed a woman I didn't quite recognize. Same face, same dark hair, but something fundamental had shifted. The invisible librarian was gone. In her place was someone who'd negotiated with a mob boss and lived. Someone who'd lied to federal agents and walked away. Someone who now had $5,000 and a direct line to one of Chicago's most dangerous criminals. I should have been terrified. Should have been planning to leave town, change my name, disappear. Instead, I found myself wondering what would happen if I called that number. What Benedetti would say if I asked for something other than money or safety. What it meant that he'd told me about Lucia, about the baby, about the pain that had shaped him into the monster he claimed to be. I was 30 years old. I'd spent 3 decades being careful, and it had gotten me nowhere. One night of recklessness had earned me more than 3 years of prudence. Maybe it was time to stop being careful. Maybe it was time to see what else I could get away with. The thought should have scared me. Instead, for the first time in years, I felt something close to excitement. My phone, which had been dead when I'd left for the Crimson Velvet, was now fully charged and sitting on my nightstand. Another gift from Benedetti's thorough men. I picked it up and saw 17 missed calls from work, 12 from Jenna, and 1 text from a number I didn't recognize. The text was simple. "Sleep well, little mouse. Tomorrow, everything changes." I fell asleep with the check under my pillow and the card clutched in my hand, and dreamed of dark eyes watching me from shadows, of whiskey that burned like truth, and of becoming someone my 30-year-old self would never recognize. Morning came with all the subtlety of a hammer. Sunlight stabbed through my cheap curtains, and my phone was ringing. I grabbed for it automatically, my body moving on autopilot before my brain had fully processed that I was awake. "Claire! Oh my God! Finally!" Jenna's voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "I've been calling you for hours. Are you okay? Why didn't you answer? I was about to catch the next flight back from Paris." "I'm fine," I croaked, my throat dry. The burgundy dress was twisted around me like a silk prison, and my mouth tasted like whiskey and regret. "What time is it?" "It's 11, in the morning, on your birthday. And you're just now answering." "Claire, what happened?" "Your voicemail was full. I thought something terrible happened." Something terrible did happen, I thought, but also something strange and surreal and impossible to explain. "Long story," I managed, sitting up and immediately regretting it as my head spun. I hadn't drunk that much, but apparently a single glass of expensive whiskey after a night of psychological warfare hit differently than my usual wine. "Can I call you back? I need coffee." "You better call me back, with details, all the details. I want to know everything about this exclusive bar you mentioned." I ended the call before she could press further, padding to my kitchen in bare feet. The dying plant on my counter had been watered, my dishes were done. Even my coffee maker had been filled, ready to brew. Evidence of Benedetti's men moving through my space, efficient and invisible. The check was still real, sitting on my counter where I'd left it after moving it from under my pillow at some point during the night. $5,000, made out to Claire Bennett, signed with an indecipherable signature that could have been anything. The card with the phone number was there too, innocuous and terrifying in equal measure. I made coffee and tried to construct a timeline of what had actually happened. 8 hours ago, I'd been a librarian celebrating my 30th birthday. Now I was a woman who'd negotiated with the mob, lied to federal agents, and somehow walked away with more money than I'd seen in years. The smart thing would be to deposit the check, pay my rent, and forget everything. Go back to my quiet life and pretend last night was a fever dream brought on by turning 30, except I couldn't forget. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Benedetti watching from the shadows, heard his voice telling me about Lucia, about loss so profound it had carved out his humanity. Felt the strange electricity that had passed between us when he'd called me brave, smart, different. I was reaching for my phone to call Jenna back when someone knocked on my door. A confident knock. 3 sharp raps that suggested the person on the other side was used to being obeyed. I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped. Connor Morrison stood in my hallway, looking tired and bruised in the harsh fluorescent light. He was wearing different clothes than last night, casual jeans and a jacket, but the split lip was still visible. "Claire," he called through the door. "I know you're home. I can hear you breathing. Please, I just want to talk. 5 minutes." Against every instinct screaming at me to stay quiet, to let him think I'd left, I opened the door. But I kept the chain lock engaged, creating a 3-inch gap between us. "What do you want?" I asked, proud of how cold my voice sounded. To apologize, to explain. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I remembered from our brief time together. "Can I come in? This isn't a conversation for hallways." "No. You have 5 minutes. Start talking." He sighed but didn't push. "Everything I told you was a lie. My name is Connor Morrison. I'm with the FBI, and I've been undercover trying to build a case against Carlo Benedetti for 6 months. The coffee shop meeting, the conversations, suggesting you go to the Crimson Velvet, all of it was calculated." "I know," I said flatly. "Benedetti already explained that part. What I want to know is why me? What made you think using a random librarian as bait was a good idea?" Connor flinched. "You weren't random. We'd been monitoring Benedetti's patterns, and we knew he had a specific type. Brunettes, intelligent, understated. Women who didn't fit the usual profile of people in his orbit. We thought if we could get someone like that into his establishment, Someone genuine and innocent. It might make him lower his guard. So you found the most pathetic, lonely woman you could and decided to use her. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. No, Connor protested, then seemed to catch himself. I mean, yes, technically, but Claire, when I actually got to know you, the conversations we had weren't all lies. I liked talking to you. You're funny and smart and stupid enough to believe a stranger might actually be interested in me, I finished. Tell me something, Agent Morrison. Did your superiors approve of you taking me to that private room? Was kissing me part of the operation, or was that freelancing? His jaw worked. That wasn't supposed to happen. I was just supposed to get you into the bar, make sure Benedetti saw us together, then extract you safely. But you looked so happy, so different from the woman I'd met 3 weeks ago. And I thought... He trailed off. You thought what? That you'd take advantage while you could? I started to close the door, but his hand shot out, stopping it. I thought I was starting to care about you, he said quietly. Which is why I panicked when I realized Benedetti was watching. Why I called my handler. I wasn't supposed to do that. It compromised the operation. But I was scared of what he might do to you. How noble, I said sarcastically. You were scared after you'd already used me as bait. After you'd put me in danger without my knowledge or consent. Tell me, did it ever occur to you that maybe you should have asked if I wanted to be part of your operation? Would you have said yes? Of course not. I'm a librarian, not a spy. I catalog books and recommend mysteries to old ladies and try to pay my rent. I don't belong in your world, and I definitely don't belong in Benedetti's. But you handled yourself remarkably well last night, Connor said, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. The way you lied to Agent Chen, the way you stood up to Benedetti. Claire, most people would have panicked. You negotiated. I stared at him through the gap in the door. How do you know I negotiated? His expression became carefully neutral. The bar has surveillance cameras. We monitor them. So you watched. You saw me go to his office. You heard us talk. A cold realization settled over me. You know about the money. The $5,000. Yes. Claire, you can't accept that money. It's evidence. It proves Benedetti is trying to buy your silence about something. If you deposit that check, you become complicit. I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the stairwell. Complicit in what exactly? I didn't witness any crimes. I was kissing a federal agent who was lying to me. Then I talked my way out of a bad situation. The money is payment for emotional distress. For having my apartment searched, and my life invaded, and my birthday ruined. It's blood money, Connor insisted, from one of the most dangerous criminals in Chicago. Money he earned from drugs, weapons, extortion. Money that will pay my rent, I interrupted. Money that will fix my car and pay down my student loans. Money that came from me being smart and brave enough to survive a situation you put me in. So, excuse me if I don't care about its moral origins. Claire, is there anything else, Agent Morrison? Because I have things to do. Like depositing this check before you try to confiscate it as evidence in whatever case you're failing to build against Benedetti. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw hurt in his eyes. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what I'd felt when I'd discovered his betrayal. I am sorry, he said finally. For what it's worth, I never wanted you to get hurt. And I'm glad you're okay. But Claire, listen to me carefully. Carlo Benedetti is not a good man. He's dangerous, and he's smart, and he doesn't do anything without a reason. If he gave you that money, if he let you walk away last night, it's because he wants something from you. Maybe not now, but eventually. That's how he operates. Thank you for the warning, I said coolly. But I think I can take care of myself. Can you? Connor's voice dropped. Because from where I'm standing, You went from invisible librarian to someone on Benedetti's radar in one night. That's not taking care of yourself. That's playing with fire and being surprised when you get burned. Maybe I want to get burned, I said, and shut the door in his face. I stood with my back against the door, listening to Connor's footsteps retreat down the hallway, and wondered if I'd just made a terrible mistake. He was right about one thing. Benedetti didn't strike me as the type to give money away without expecting something in return. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I hope Agent Morrison's visit wasn't too unpleasant. He means well, despite his incompetence. CB. I stared at the message. He knew Connor had been here, was still watching me, despite his promise that the surveillance had ended. Or maybe he had people watching Connor, and I was collateral observation. Before I could overthink it, I typed back, "How long are you going to keep watching me?" The response came immediately. "As long as it takes to ensure you're safe. Morrison's superiors aren't happy about last night. They might decide you're worth pressuring. I prefer to be prepared. I can take care of myself." "I'm sure you can, little mouse. But humor me. Consider it a birthday gift. Protection you didn't ask for and don't particularly want, but might need anyway. I shouldn't engage, shouldn't respond, should block the number and forget this entire nightmare. Instead, I found myself typing, 'What do you really want from me?' The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. When the response finally came, it was longer than his previous texts. "I told you last night. I appreciate honesty. You're the first person in a decade who's looked at me without fear or pity or calculation. Just clear-eyed assessment of what I am. That's rare, valuable. And before you ask, no, I don't want anything sinister. I don't plan to recruit you into my organization or use you against the FBI or any of the dramatic scenarios I'm sure you're imagining. I simply find you interesting, and I protect things that interest me." "I'm not a thing," I texted back. "No. You're a 30-year-old librarian with a dying plant and $5,000 who negotiated with a mob boss and lived. You're considerably more than a thing, Claire. Which is precisely why you're interesting." My doorbell rang again, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. But when I checked the peephole, it wasn't Connor returning. It was a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of flowers. "Delivery for Claire Bennett," he called. I opened the door and signed for the arrangement, so large I could barely see over it. The card was simple. "Happy 30th. May this year be less boring than the last 29. CB." I set the flowers on my counter, 2 dozen roses in deep burgundy, the exact color of my dress from last night, and realized I was smiling. Actually smiling, despite everything. Despite the fear and confusion and the knowledge that I was getting tangled in something dangerous. My phone rang. Jenna again. This time I answered. "Hey. Okay. You've had your coffee. Now explain to me why you sound weird, and why there are 17 missed calls from work, and why I'm getting a very strange feeling that your birthday adventure was more adventurous than planned." I looked at the flowers, the check, the card with Benedetti's number. Thought about Connor's warnings and Benedetti's texts, and the fact that for the first time in 30 years, my life felt like it might actually be interesting. "Jen," I said slowly, "I did something really stupid last night." "How stupid are we talking? Like drunk karaoke stupid or slept with your boss stupid? More like accidentally got involved with the mob stupid." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a long moment. Then, "I'm booking the next flight home. Don't do anything else until I get there. Promise me, Claire." "I promise," I lied, because I could already feel it, the pull toward something darker and more exciting than my careful life had ever offered. Benedetti was dangerous. Connor was right about that. But he was also interesting in a way no one else had ever been. He saw me, really saw me, and instead of dismissing quiet Claire the librarian, he'd called me brave and smart and interesting. When was the last time anyone had called me interesting? I opened my banking app and photographed the check, depositing all $5,000 with a few taps. There. Done. No going back now. I was officially complicit, officially tangled in whatever web Benedetti was weaving. My phone buzzed one more time. Good choice. Now go live your boring life, little mouse. Try not to make any more deals with criminals. Though if you do, call me first. I'll make sure you get a better rate. I should have been terrified. Should have been planning my escape from Chicago, from Benedetti, from this entire situation. Instead, I found myself texting back. And if I want to make another deal with you specifically? The response took longer this time. When it came, I could almost hear the dark amusement in his voice. Then I suggest you be very careful about what you wish for, Claire. Because I'm the type of monster who grants wishes, usually with unexpected consequences. I stared at that message for a long time, my coffee growing cold, the burgundy roses filling my apartment with their scent. Somewhere in Chicago, Carlo Benedetti was going about his day, running his empire, being exactly the monster everyone knew him to be. And somewhere in that same city, I was discovering that maybe I didn't want to be invisible anymore. Maybe I wanted to be the type of person who made deals with monsters and survived. Maybe I wanted to see what else I was capable of when I stopped being careful. My phone rang again. Work this time, probably wondering why I hadn't shown up for my shift. I should answer, should explain, should apologize. Instead, I let it go to voicemail and texted Benedetti one more time. What if the consequences are exactly what I'm looking for? His response was immediate. Then, little mouse, we should talk. But not over text, and not in your apartment where federal agents might be listening. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks north of your building. Be there in an hour. Come alone. And Claire? Wear something other than that dying library cardigan. If we're going to negotiate, you should look the part. I looked down at myself, still wearing the burgundy dress from last night, wrinkled and creased. My reflection in the hallway mirror showed someone who'd survived one dangerous night and was apparently ready to tempt fate again. 30 years old, no longer invisible, no longer safe. And for the first time in my life, I was okay with that. The coffee shop Benedetti had specified wasn't the cozy neighborhood place I'd imagined. Instead, it was an upscale Italian cafe tucked between a designer boutique and an art gallery, the kind of place where a simple espresso probably cost more than my usual lunch. Through the window I could see marble tables, leather chairs, and clientele who looked like they'd never worried about rent in their lives. I'd changed out of the burgundy dress into dark jeans and a black sweater that was nicer than my usual library attire, but still felt inadequate. My hair was pulled back, makeup minimal. I looked like exactly what I was. A woman out of her depth, trying to appear confident while walking into a meeting with a mob boss. Benedetti sat at a corner table, positioned so he could see both the entrance and the street outside. He wore a charcoal suit today, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone in a way that managed to look both casual and expensive. A tablet sat in front of him, and he was reading something intently when I entered. He looked up immediately, as if he'd sensed my arrival, and gestured to the chair across from him. Claire, punctual. I appreciate that. You said an hour. It's been an hour. I sat, hyper-aware of the other patrons who weren't quite looking at us but were definitely aware of Benedetti's presence. The cafe had the hushed quality of a place where important people conducted business they didn't want overheard. A waitress appeared instantly, young and nervous. Mr. Benedetti, the usual. Yes, and for the lady. He looked at me, one eyebrow raised. Cappuccino, I said, because it seemed like the kind of thing you ordered in a place like this. With almond biscotti, Benedetti added. She looks like she hasn't eaten today. The waitress disappeared, and I fought the urge to argue that he didn't know whether I'd eaten or not, except he probably did know. Had probably known the moment I'd woken up this morning. known when Connor had visited, known when I'd deposited his check. "You're still watching me," I said, keeping my voice low. "I told you I would, until I'm certain the FBI won't retaliate." He set the tablet aside, giving me his full attention. Those dark eyes studied my face with an intensity that made me want to look away. "Agent Morrison visited you this morning. Warned you about accepting my money, I assume." "How did you—" I stopped. Stupid question. "Yes. He said it was blood money, that I'd be complicit. And yet you deposited it anyway. Interesting choice for a woman who spent 30 years being careful." "Maybe I'm tired of being careful. Or maybe you're attracted to danger." His voice was neutral, but something in his expression suggested he found this amusing. "Tell me, Claire, what did you mean by your text, about consequences being what you're looking for?" The cappuccino arrived, along with a small plate of perfectly golden biscotti. I took a sip to buy myself time, surprised by how good it was. Rich and smooth, nothing like the burnt coffee I usually survived on. "I meant," I said slowly, "that I've spent my entire life avoiding risk, being invisible, safe, and it got me nowhere. A job I'm overqualified for, an apartment I can barely afford, no relationships, no adventures, nothing. One night of risk, of being bold, and suddenly I have $5,000 and someone who thinks I'm interesting. So maybe the consequences of continued risk are worth exploring." Benedetti was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Do you know what I do, Claire? What my business actually is?" "I can guess. Nothing legal." "I control most of the drug distribution in Chicago. Heroin, cocaine, fentanyl. Substances that destroy lives, tear families apart, kill people. I own legitimate businesses too. Restaurants, construction companies, this cafe. But they're fronts for money laundering. I've ordered people killed. Not many. I'm not unnecessarily violent. But when someone betrays me or threatens my operation, they disappear. Permanently. I bribe politicians, blackmail judges, and ensure that law enforcement looks the other way. This is who I am. This is what you'd be risking yourself for." He said it all calmly, matter-of-factly, watching my reaction. Testing me, I realized. Waiting to see if I'd flinch, if the reality of his world would send me running. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you said you wanted consequences. I want you to understand what those consequences actually entail. If you continue engaging with me, if you become someone I'm seen with regularly, you become a target. My enemies will assume you matter to me. The FBI will pressure you for information. Your quiet life disappears completely. So I need you to decide right now, before this goes any further. Do you really want this? Or do you want to finish your cappuccino, thank me for the money, and go back to cataloging books?" It was an out. A clear, clean exit from this insanity. I could walk away right now, block his number, pretend last night had been a bizarre dream. Go back to being invisible. Safe Claire who never took risks. "What would continuing to engage with you look like?" I asked instead. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or satisfaction. "That depends on what you want, little mouse. Companionship? I could use someone intelligent to talk to who isn't on my payroll. Employment? I'm sure I could find a use for someone with your research skills and eye for detail. Something else entirely?" He left the suggestion hanging. "I don't want to work for you," I said carefully. "And I'm not looking for romance, if that's what you're suggesting." "Romance," he repeated, and his smile was cold. "I don't do romance, Claire. I do transactions, arrangements, mutually beneficial relationships where everyone understands their role. I told you about Lucia because you needed context for why I am the way I am. Not because I'm looking to replace her. She was irreplaceable. Then what do you want from me? He took a slow sip of his espresso before answering. I told you last night. I find you interesting. You're intelligent enough to be useful, bold enough to be entertaining, and honest enough to be trustworthy. A rare combination. I'm proposing an arrangement. You spend time with me occasionally. Dinners, events where I need someone presentable and respectable on my arm. In exchange, I ensure your life becomes considerably more comfortable than it currently is. You want me to be your fake girlfriend, I said flatly. I want you to be exactly what you are, a librarian who happens to accompany me to social functions. It's not uncommon in my world. Powerful men are expected to have companions. Beautiful women who make them look less threatening, more civilized. And what do these companions typically know about the men they're accompanying? As little as possible, for their own safety. He set down his cup. But you already know more than most, and you're still here, which suggests you're either very brave or very stupid. I'm hoping it's the former. I broke off a piece of biscotti, letting the sweetness dissolve on my tongue while I thought. This was insane. Absolutely insane. Agreeing to spend time with a man who'd just admitted to murder and drug trafficking, who could make me disappear if I became inconvenient. But he'd also saved me from FBI scrutiny, given me money I desperately needed, and treated me with more respect and honesty than Connor ever had. And there was something intoxicating about being seen by someone like him. About being considered useful, interesting, worth investing in. How much more comfortable? I asked. Practical question. Good. He pulled a folder from beneath his tablet and slid it across the table. I took the liberty of having my people draw up a contract. Nothing legally binding, obviously. I can't exactly take you to court if you violate it, but it outlines the terms clearly. I opened the folder and nearly choked on my biscotti. The first page listed a monthly stipend that was 3 times my current salary. Below that, provisions for a new apartment in a better neighborhood, a car that actually worked, health insurance, and a clothing allowance for the events I'd be expected to attend. I couldn't find words. Fair compensation for your time and the risks you'd be taking. I don't exploit people who help me, Claire. I pay them well and protect them thoroughly. In exchange, I expect discretion, loyalty, and your presence at approximately 3 to 4 events per month. More during busy seasons. What kind of events? Charity galas, business dinners, occasionally more casual gatherings. Nothing you can't handle. You'll be briefed beforehand on who will be present and what you can safely discuss. Your role is simply to be charming, intelligent, and unremarkable, to make me appear more human. More human, I repeated. You want me to be your humanity prop. If you want to phrase it that way, yes. I need someone who can navigate high society without embarrassing me, who won't be intimidated by wealth or power, and who understands that what they see and hear remains confidential. You fit those criteria. I looked at the contract again, my mind racing. This was everything I'd told Connor I needed. Financial stability, breathing room, a way out of my suffocating life. And all I had to do was attend fancy parties with a mob boss and keep my mouth shut. What about the FBI? I asked. Connor said they might pressure me. Let me worry about the FBI. If they approach you, you tell them nothing and contact me immediately. I have lawyers who specialize in dealing with overzealous federal agents. He paused. You should know that accepting this arrangement will likely end any possibility of a relationship with Agent Morrison. Good, I said without thinking, and Benedetti's eyebrow rose. You sound certain. He lied to me. Used me. He doesn't get to decide who I spend time with anymore. I met Benedetti's gaze. But before I agree to anything, I need to know something. Last night, when you told me about Lucia, about your daughter, was that manipulation? Or were you being honest? His expression went carefully blank. Why does it matter? Because if you can lie that convincingly about something that painful, then I can't trust anything you say. And this arrangement requires trust, doesn't it? I need to trust that you'll protect me, pay me, keep your word. You need to trust that I'll be discreet, loyal, useful. So I'm asking directly. Were you lying? The silence stretched between us, the noise of the cafe fading into background static. Benedetti's jaw worked, and for a moment I thought he might stand up and leave. Or worse. No, he said finally, his voice rough. I wasn't lying. I don't lie about Lucia. Ever. That's sacred ground, Claire. The one place where I remain human. Even if everywhere else I'm the monster you called me. I believed him. God help me, but I believed him. Maybe I was stupid. Maybe I was being manipulated by someone far more experienced at manipulation than I could comprehend. But something in his voice, in the way his hands tightened almost imperceptibly on his espresso cup, rang true. Okay, I said. I'll do it, with one condition. Name it. If at any point I want out, I can leave. No threats, no consequences, no mysterious accidents. I walk away with whatever money I've earned to that point, and you leave me alone. Can you agree to that? Or, he considered this, his expression thoughtful. With one caveat, you can't walk away in the middle of an event, or immediately after learning something sensitive. If you want out, you give me 2 weeks' notice. Time to ensure your departure doesn't create problems for either of us. Fair? It was more than fair. It was suspiciously reasonable for a man who'd admitted to murder just minutes ago. But I nodded. Fair. Then we have an agreement. He extended his hand across the table, and I took it. His grip was firm, warm, and sent an unexpected jolt through my system. Welcome to my world, little mouse. Try not to get eaten alive. When do I start? Tonight, actually. There's a fundraiser for the Art Institute. I need a date who appreciates culture and won't embarrass me in front of museum board members. Can you be ready by 7? Tonight? My voice came out higher than intended. I don't have anything to wear to a museum fundraiser. Already handled. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. My assistant will be at your apartment in 2 hours with 3 dress options. Choose whichever you prefer. A car will collect you at 6:30. And Claire? He stood, buttoning his jacket. Don't be nervous. You'll be the most genuine person in the room. That's your strength. Use it. He left cash on the table, far more than the coffee cost, and walked out, leaving me sitting alone with a contract that would change my life and a growing sense that I'd just made either the best or worst decision of my 30 years. I read through the contract 3 more times, looking for hidden clauses or tricks. But it was straightforward, almost boringly so. Monthly payment, expense account, provisions for termination. Everything spelled out clearly, as if Benedetti wanted no confusion about what he expected. My phone buzzed, a text from the number I now recognized as his. Second thoughts already? Just making sure I'm not signing away my soul. Souls are worthless in my business, Claire. I deal in much more practical commodities. Besides, I suspect you still have yours. Try to keep it that way. It makes you more interesting. I walked home in a daze, the contract tucked safely in my bag. The autumn air was crisp, Chicago bustling around me with complete indifference to the fact that my life had just fundamentally changed. I passed the library where I worked. Where I used to work, I corrected myself. I couldn't keep that job now. Not with this arrangement. Sarah would be disappointed. Jenna would be horrified. Connor would probably try to arrest me or recruit me or both. But for the first time in 30 years, I felt like I was living instead of just existing. Like I mattered to someone, even if that someone was a monster who dealt in death and drugs and destruction. My apartment felt smaller when I returned, shabbier. The $5,000 had seemed like so much this morning. Now, looking at the monthly stipend in the contract, it felt like pocket change. By this time next month, I could have a new apartment, a reliable car, nice clothes, everything I'd told myself I didn't need because I couldn't afford to want it. Exactly 2 hours after I'd left the cafe, my doorbell rang. A woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed, stood in my hallway with 3 garment bags and a professional smile. "Miss Bennett, I'm Margaret, Mr. Benedetti's assistant. May I come in?" I stepped aside, letting her enter with the garment bags. She moved with efficient grace, laying them across my bed and unzipping them to reveal 3 stunning evening gowns. One black, one deep green, one midnight blue. All clearly expensive, all exactly my size. "How did he know my size?" I asked. Margaret's smile never wavered. "Mr. Benedetti is very thorough. He also wanted me to provide these." She handed me a jewelry box. Inside were delicate diamond earrings and a matching bracelet. "Costume, of course, but high quality. You'll also need these." A pair of elegant heels appeared. And this. A small evening bag. I've taken the liberty of including makeup recommendations and hairstyling suggestions. "The car will arrive at 6:30 sharp. Do you have any questions?" I had about 1,000 questions, but Margaret's professional demeanor suggested she'd answered them all hundreds of times before. "No," I said. "Thank you." "Excellent. Mr. Benedetti mentioned you might feel nervous. He wanted me to tell you that you'll do fine. Just be yourself. He specifically requested that you not try to be anyone else." She headed for the door, then paused. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Benedetti doesn't usually make arrangements like this. In the 5 years I've worked for him, you're the first. Whatever he sees in you, it's unique. I suggest you be careful with it." Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone, leaving me alone with 3 evening gowns and the dawning realization that tonight I'd be attending a high society fundraiser on the arm of one of Chicago's most dangerous criminals. I chose the midnight blue dress. It reminded me of the night sky, of darkness hiding stars. When I put it on, I barely recognized myself. The woman in the mirror looked sophisticated, confident, like someone who belonged at museum galas instead of library basements. The earrings caught the light as I fastened them, sending tiny rainbows dancing across my walls. I followed Margaret's makeup instructions, applied the deep red lipstick she'd included, and styled my hair in a way that looked effortless, but had taken 30 minutes to achieve. At 6:29, I stood by my window watching for the car. My hands were shaking, and I kept touching the bracelet on my wrist like a talisman. This was insane. I should call Jenna, confess everything, ask her to talk me out of this. Instead, when the sleek black car pulled up at exactly 6:30, I grabbed the evening bag, locked my apartment, and walked downstairs to meet whatever consequences I'd agreed to. The driver opened the door without speaking, and I slid into the leather interior. The car smelled expensive, that particular scent of wealth that came from real leather and quality materials. We pulled away from my shabby building, heading toward a part of Chicago where people like me usually only went as tourists. My phone buzzed. Benedetti. "Breathe, little mouse. It's just a party. You've survived worse." I typed back, "I've survived exactly 1 night in your world. That's not a large sample size. Then tonight will be your second. By the end of the month, this will feel normal. That's when you should start worrying." I stared at that last message as the city lights blurred past the window. When this feels normal. When attending galas with mob bosses feels like just another evening. When I forget what it was like to be invisible, Claire, boring Claire, safe Claire. The car pulled up to the Art Institute, where a red carpet and photographers waited. Through the tinted windows, I could see couples in formal wear making their entrance, flashbulbs popping, society on display. "Miss Bennet," the driver said, speaking for the first time. "Mr. Benedetti is waiting just inside. I'll park and be available when you're ready to leave. You have my number if you need anything." He handed me a card, then came around to open my door. The moment I stepped out, I felt exposed. The photographers mostly ignored me. I was arriving alone, after all, not important enough to photograph. But I felt their potential attention like a weight. Inside, the museum had been transformed. Candlelight, champagne, the low murmur of wealthy conversation. A string quartet played in the corner. People in tuxedos and gowns moved through the galleries like living artwork themselves. And there, waiting by a marble column, was Benedetti. He wore a tuxedo that made his earlier suits look casual. His hair was perfectly styled, the scar on his eyebrow somehow adding to, rather than detracting from his appearance. When he saw me, something in his expression shifted. Approval, I thought, or maybe satisfaction. He crossed to me in 3 strides, taking my hand and raising it to his lips, in a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and somehow dangerous. "Claire," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You look perfect." "Nervous?" "Terrified," I admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He tucked my hand into the crook of his elbow. "Stay close, smile when appropriate, and remember, you know more about art than half these people. They're just better at pretending. Shall we?" And just like that, I was walking into the glittering heart of Chicago high society on the arm of a mob boss, wearing borrowed diamonds and a dress that cost more than my monthly rent, about to discover what consequences really look like. The night, I suspected, was only beginning. The fundraiser was exactly what I'd expected, and nothing like I'd imagined. The people were beautiful in that curated way wealth allows. Perfect teeth, perfect skin, perfect clothes that whispered rather than shouted their expense. But beneath the polish, I could sense the same hierarchy that existed everywhere. The subtle positioning, the careful conversations, everyone measuring everyone else. Benedetti moved through it all with practiced ease, his hand warm on the small of my back as he guided me from group to group. He introduced me simply as Claire, a colleague with expertise in rare books and manuscripts. Not a girlfriend, not a date, just someone cultured enough to belong at his side. Carlo, a silver-haired woman in emeralds, descended on us, air-kissing Benedetti's cheeks. "Darling, I haven't seen you since the symphony gala. And who is this?" "Claire Bennet," I said, extending my hand before Benedetti could answer. "I work with historical documents, mainly Italian Renaissance, but I've been expanding into modern acquisitions lately." It was close enough to the truth. I did catalog historical documents, just in a library basement rather than auction houses. The woman's eyes lit up with interest, and suddenly we were deep in conversation about a recent Medici family correspondence that had sold at Christie's. When she finally drifted away, Benedetti leaned close to my ear. "Well done. She's one of the museum's largest donors. You just made me look considerably more cultured than I actually am." "That's why I'm here, isn't it? To make you look human." "Among other reasons." His hand pressed slightly firmer against my back, a gesture that might have looked protective but felt possessive. "Come, there's someone I need you to meet." The someone turned out to be a city alderman, with calculating eyes and a politician's smile. He and Benedetti spoke in careful euphemisms about community development and local business interests, while I stood beside them, understanding exactly what they meant. Money laundering and political protection, dressed up in civic language. The alderman's wife, bored with the men's conversation, turned to me. "Have you known Carlo long?" "Not very," I answered carefully. "We met recently through mutual interests in Italian culture." "How lovely. He's been alone for so long, poor dear. Ever since—" She caught herself, glancing at Benedetti. Well, it's nice to see him out with someone again. I felt Benedetti tense beside me, though his expression never changed. The wife, sensing she'd stumbled into sensitive territory, quickly excused herself. "I'm sorry," I said quietly when we were alone again. She mentioned, "It's fine. People talk. They always have." But his voice was tight, and I noticed his hand had moved from my back to grip his champagne glass with white-knuckled force. "Let's move. I need air." He guided me out onto a balcony overlooking the city. The cold October air a shock after the warmth inside. Chicago sprawled below us, all lights and darkness, beautiful and indifferent. "You didn't tell me people would bring up Lucia," I said. "I didn't think they would. Most know better, but aldermen's wives aren't bound by the same rules as everyone else." He set down the champagne glass on the balcony railing. "Are you enjoying yourself?" "Is that a serious question?" "You're doing well. Better than I expected, actually. You move through these people like you belong." "I don't belong," I said. "I'm just good at pretending. 30 years of being invisible teaches you to mirror people, to become what they expect." He turned to look at me then. Really look at me. And something in his expression made my breath catch. "You're not invisible anymore, Claire. In that dress, with those eyes. You're anything but." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, and his entire demeanor shifted. The urbane gentleman vanished, replaced by something harder, colder. "We need to leave, now." "What's wrong?" "Something that requires my immediate attention. Come." He took my hand, not gentle now, and led me quickly back through the fundraiser. We were halfway to the exit when a voice stopped us. "Carlo Benedetti, fancy seeing you here." I turned to see Connor Morrison, wearing an ill-fitting suit and an expression that mixed anger with something darker. He wasn't alone. Agent Chen stood beside him, along with 2 other agents I didn't recognize. "Agent Morrison," Benedetti said, his voice perfectly calm despite the tension radiating through his body. "I didn't realize federal agents attended these events. Tickets are quite expensive." "We're here in an official capacity," Chen said coolly, "following up on some questions about your business operations. And I'm curious about Miss Bennett's presence. Claire, I thought you understood the seriousness of your situation." "I'm attending a museum fundraiser with a friend," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "There's nothing illegal about that." "A friend who happens to be under federal investigation," Connor said, his eyes on Benedetti. "Claire, you don't have to do this. Whatever he's promised you, whatever he's threatened you with, we can protect you." "I don't need protection from him," I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. "I need you to stop harassing me because I made a statement you didn't like." "Carlo," a new voice interrupted, and we all turned to see a man I didn't recognize. He was younger than Benedetti, maybe mid-30s, with slicked-back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Trouble with the federales?" "Nothing I can't handle, Marco," Benedetti said, but there was a warning in his tone. Good. Because we have that matter to discuss. The one I texted you about. Can't wait." Marco's smile widened as he looked at me. "And who's this? Haven't seen you with anyone since—" "Leave," Benedetti said, and the word was so sharp, so filled with threat, that Marco actually took a step back. "Sure, boss. No problem. Just saying hi to your pretty friend." He disappeared into the crowd, but I saw him watching us from across the room. "Claire," Agent Chen said, "if you'd like to leave with us instead, we can provide—" "No," I said firmly. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm exactly where I want to be." Connor's expression crumpled. "You have no idea what you're getting into. He's not the man you think he is." Neither were you, I said, and watched him flinch. At least he's been honest about who he is. Benedetti's hand found my elbow. Agent Chen, we're leaving. If you'd like to arrest me, I suggest you present a warrant. Otherwise, this constitutes harassment. We were in the car 3 minutes later, Benedetti giving terse instructions to the driver in Italian. I sat beside him, my heart racing, trying to process what had just happened. That man, Marco, I said. He works for you? Marco Russo, my lieutenant, second in command. Benedetti's jaw was tight. He's also become a problem. What kind of problem? He looked at me for a long moment, as if deciding how much to tell me. The kind that gets people killed. The text I received at the fundraiser was from one of my people. Marco's been meeting with the Santini family, my rivals. Either he's planning to betray me, or he's already has. The casual way he discussed betrayal and rival families made me realize how deep I'd gotten. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was real danger, real violence, real consequences. What are you going to do? I whispered. What I have to. His hand found mine in the darkness of the car, squeezing once. Claire, I need to ask something of you. Something beyond our arrangement. What? Trust me. For the next few hours, possibly longer, I need you to stay where I tell you, do what I say, and not ask questions. Can you do that? Every instinct screamed at me to say no, to demand to be taken home, to end this before it went any further. But I looked at his face, saw the tension there, the worry he was trying to hide, and found myself nodding. Good. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking rapid Italian. I caught words here and there: sicura, safe, protezione, protection, nessuno, no one. When he ended the call, he gave the driver a new address in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. 20 minutes later, we pulled up to a brownstone in Lincoln Park. Expensive, quiet, residential. Nothing that suggested mob boss territory. Safe house, Benedetti explained, helping me out of the car. No one knows about this place except my most trusted people. You'll be secure here. And where will you be? Handling Marco. If he's planning what I think he is, tonight was meant to be a distraction. While I'm at the fundraiser, being watched by federal agents, he makes his move. Takes control of my operations, possibly eliminates me altogether. Then don't go, I said, grabbing his arm. Stay here. Let him think you don't know. If I don't confront him now, from a position of strength I look weak. In my world, weakness is death. He cupped my face with surprising gentleness. I'll be back before morning. Elena is waiting inside. You remember her? She'll make sure you have everything you need. Carlo? I stopped, surprised I'd used his first name. Be careful. Something flickered across his face, an emotion I couldn't name. Careful isn't how I've survived this long little mouse, but I appreciate the sentiment. He was gone before I could respond, the car pulling away and leaving me standing on a street that didn't feel like mine, wearing a dress I hadn't paid for, about to spend the night in a mob boss's safe house while he dealt with a potential coup. Elena opened the door before I could knock. She looked different than she had at his estate. Less formal, more tired. Miss Bennett, come in quickly. The interior of the brownstone was surprisingly normal. Comfortable furniture, warm lighting, a kitchen that looked actually used. Not the cold luxury of Benedetti's other properties. He comes here when he needs to think, Elena explained, seeing my expression. Away from the empire, the expectations. This is the closest thing he has to a home. She showed me to a bedroom upstairs, providing pajamas and toiletries. You should rest. It may be a long night. But I couldn't rest. I paced the room, checking my phone obsessively. No messages from Benedetti, nothing from Connor or the FBI, just Jenna, asking if I was okay, and Sarah from work, wondering if I was coming back. I was drafting a response to Sarah, some excuse about family emergency, needing time off, when I heard breaking glass downstairs. I froze, phone clutched in my hand. Footsteps, multiple people moving through the house. Elena's voice, sharp with warning, then a crash. A gunshot, deafening in the quiet brownstone. My heart hammered against my ribs. The bedroom door had a lock, but it was flimsy. I looked around frantically for a weapon, for an escape, for anything. "Find the girl," a man's voice said. Marco. I recognized it from the fundraiser. Benedetti will come running if we have her. Stupid bastard went soft, bringing a civilian into this. I grabbed my phone and did the only thing I could think of. I texted Benedetti. "Marco's here. He knows about the safe house. Elena's been shot. I'm hiding upstairs. Help." Then I climbed out the bedroom window onto a narrow ledge overlooking the backyard. The drop was 15 feet, maybe more. I could break an ankle, or worse. But the alternative was facing Marco, and whoever he'd brought with him. I heard them kicking in the bedroom door as I lowered myself over the edge, my fingers screaming as they gripped the windowsill. The midnight blue dress was not designed for climbing. Neither were the borrowed heels, which I kicked off, letting them fall into the darkness below. "She went out the window," someone shouted. I dropped. The impact jolted through my legs, and pain exploded in my left ankle. I bit back a scream and scrambled toward the back fence, dragging my injured foot, praying I could make it over before hands grabbed me from behind. I fought, kicking and clawing, but they were stronger. A cloth pressed over my mouth, chemical sweet, and the world tilted. My last thought before darkness claimed me was that I'd been wrong about consequences. I'd thought the worst that could happen was getting tangled in Benedetti's world. I'd never imagined becoming a bargaining chip in a war I didn't fully understand. When I woke, I was in a car. My hands were zip-tied, my ankle throbbing, my mouth dry with whatever they'd used to knock me out. Marco sat in the front passenger seat, talking on the phone. "Yeah, we got her. Tell Benedetti if he wants his little girlfriend back, he meets us at the warehouse. Alone, unarmed, or she dies screaming." He ended the call and turned to look at me. "Awake? Good. You're about to find out what happens to people who choose the wrong side in Chicago." I wanted to tell him I hadn't chosen any side, that I was just a librarian who'd made a stupid decision on her birthday. But my voice wouldn't work, fear closing my throat. The warehouse they took me to was exactly what I expected. Abandoned, industrial, the perfect place for violence no one would witness. They dragged me inside, my injured ankle refusing to support my weight, and tied me to a chair in the center of an empty floor. "Now we wait," Marco said, pulling out a cigarette. "Benedetti will come. He always does for people he cares about. That's his weakness. He thinks loyalty and protection matter. But they don't. Only power matters. And when he walks through that door, I'll have all his power." "He'll kill you," I managed, my voice hoarse. "You know that, right? Even if you kill him, his people will hunt you forever." Marco laughed. "His people are my people now. I've spent 6 months flipping them, one by one. The ones who won't flip are already dead. By morning, the Benedetti Empire will be the Russo Empire. And you, sweetheart, will be a lovely bonus. Maybe I'll keep you around. You're prettier than I expected." He moved closer, his hand trailing down my arm, and I flinched away. His smile widened. "Or maybe I'll just let my men have some fun before I kill you. Benedetti doesn't get to keep anything when this is over. Not his territory, not his money, and definitely not his pretty little librarian." The door exploded inward. Benedetti didn't walk in. He erupted through the entrance like violence given form, gun raised, 3 of his men behind him. Marco dove for cover, his men returning fire, and suddenly the warehouse was chaos. I threw myself sideways, chair and all, hitting the concrete floor hard enough to knock the wind from my lungs. Bullets whined overhead. Someone screamed. Glass shattered. Then hands were on me, cutting the zip ties, hauling me up. Benedetti, his face a mask of controlled rage, blood on his shirt that I hoped wasn't his. "Can you walk?" he demanded. "Ankle's broken, I think." He didn't hesitate. One arm scooped under my knees, the other around my back, and he lifted me like I weighed nothing. Behind us, his men were still fighting Marco's people, but Benedetti was already carrying me toward a side exit. "Boss," one of his men shouted, "we got Russo cornered." "End it," Benedetti called back. "No survivors." We burst out into the cold night air, and he carried me to a waiting car. Only when we were inside, driving away from the gunfire and chaos, did he set me down carefully on the seat. "You're hurt," he said, his hands already examining my ankle with surprising gentleness. "I'm alive. Elena. Being treated by my doctor." The bullet grazed her shoulder. "She'll be fine." His jaw tightened. "This is my fault. I should never have brought you into this. You didn't have a choice. Marco would have made his move regardless. But I gave him a target. I let you become visible in my world, and the moment you did, you became a liability, a weakness to exploit." His hands were shaking as they touched my ankle, the first sign of fear I'd ever seen from him. "I almost lost you." "But you didn't. You came. Just like Marco said you would." "Of course I came," he said, and his voice was raw. "Do you understand now, Claire? Do you see what it means to be mine? Not in some arrangement, not as a companion for events, but truly mine? It means being a target, being in danger, being someone I would burn the city down to protect." I stared at him, seeing past the mob boss to the man beneath, the one who'd lost Lucia and their daughter, who told himself he'd never care about anyone again, never make himself that vulnerable, who was currently cradling my injured ankle like it was something precious. "Then I guess we're both stupid," I whispered. "Because I came back from that window ledge not thinking about escaping you, but about surviving for you. I texted you first. Not the FBI, not my friends. You. Because somehow, in the space of 2 days, you became the person I trusted most." His eyes met mine, dark and infinite, and full of something that might have been hope if he'd allowed himself to feel it. "You're not making this easy." "Nothing about this has been easy. Why start now?" He leaned forward, his forehead resting against mine. "If you stay, if you really commit to this, to us, there's no safe exit. You become part of my world permanently, under my protection, but also my responsibility. My enemies will assume you matter. The FBI will pressure you. Your old life disappears completely. Do you understand that?" "I understand that my old life was dying slowly in a library basement," I said. "This might be dangerous and insane and probably going to end badly. But at least I'm alive." "Then we're both fools," he murmured, and kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and possessive and tasted like blood and fear and relief all mixed together. When he pulled back, his thumb traced my lower lip. "You're mine now, Claire Bennett, and I protect what's mine with everything I have." I noticed. "You literally shot your way into a warehouse for me." "That was nothing. If someone hurts you again, I'll show you what real protection looks like. What real consequences are." His smile was dark and absolutely genuine. "Starting with making sure you never have to worry about rent or student loans or dying plants ever again." The car pulled up to a building I didn't recognize. Luxury high-rise, doorman, the kind of place I'd walked past thousands of times without imagining I could ever afford. "Penthouse is yours," Benedetti said, helping me out of the car with my injured ankle. Elena's already had your things moved from your old apartment. Consider it a birthday gift, 3 weeks late, along with the car in the parking garage and the unlimited credit card the doorman will give you tomorrow. Carlo. And before you argue, know that I'm doing this because I want to, not because our arrangement requires it. You saved yourself tonight. Climbed out a window in an evening gown and heels because you refused to be a helpless victim. That's worth considerably more than a penthouse and a car. He carried me into the elevator, and I let him, too exhausted and overwhelmed to protest. The penthouse was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture, a kitchen I'd actually want to cook in. My few possessions looked lost in all that space. Our arrangement, I said, as he set me on the couch. I'm guessing that's void now? The legal arrangement, yes. This is something else entirely. He knelt beside the couch, his hand finding mine. I'm not good at this, Claire. At caring about someone. At being vulnerable. The last time I did, I lost everything. But you make me want to try again. To see if maybe there's still some humanity left in the monster. You're not a monster, I said. Monsters don't save people. They don't grieve for 10 years. They don't carry injured librarians through war zones. I've done monstrous things. That won't change. No, I agreed. But maybe you do those things to protect something worth protecting now, instead of just for power or revenge. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, there's something you should know. About Marco's betrayal. About tonight. What? He didn't figure out the safe house location on his own. Someone told him. Someone close to me, who knew exactly where you'd be. His expression darkened. I think it was Agent Morrison. Connor? No, that's... But I stopped, remembering Connor's face at the fundraiser, the desperation in his voice. He wanted to protect me. He wanted to use you. Again. What better way to prove you're in danger with me than to arrange for that danger himself? He tells Marco where you'll be. Marco grabs you. I come running, and suddenly you're back under FBI protection, telling them everything you've learned. That's insane. The FBI wouldn't endanger a civilian to catch a criminal? Claire, they do it all the time. Morrison's already done it once. Why not again? He stood, moving to the window. I have people looking into it. If I'm right, if Morrison betrayed your location to my enemy, he won't live long enough to regret it. You can't kill a federal agent, I said, my voice rising. That would bring down everything. The entire FBI would hunt you. Then he should have thought about that before he put you in danger. His voice was cold, final. This is what I am. Claire. What I do. People who threaten what's mine don't get second chances. Not Russo, not Morrison, not anyone. I should have been horrified. Should have recognized this as the line I couldn't cross. But looking at him silhouetted against the Chicago skyline, I understood. This was the consequence I'd asked for. The reality of choosing his world. He would kill to protect me. And somehow, that felt less terrifying than it should. Then I guess we're in this together, I said quietly. For better or worse. Probably worse, let's be honest. He turned back to me, something like relief crossing his face. I'll have my doctor look at that ankle tomorrow, and we'll discuss what comes next. But tonight, you rest. You've earned it. What about you? You're bleeding. Flesh wound. I've had worse. But he let me clean and bandage the cut on his arm, sitting still while I played nurse with the first aid kit Elena had thoughtfully left in the bathroom. This is insane, I murmured as I wrapped gauze around his bicep. 2 days ago I was a librarian. Now I'm patching up a mob boss in a penthouse I didn't know existed. And yet you're still here, still choosing this. His hand caught my wrist, stilling my movements. Why? Because you see me, I said simply. Because in your world, I'm not invisible. I'm not boring. I matter, even if the price of mattering is danger and chaos and probably therapy for the rest of my life. He pulled me closer, careful of my ankle, until I was sitting in his lap. You matter more than you should, he admitted against my hair. More than is safe for either of us. But I'm too selfish to let you go now. Good, I whispered, because I'm too stubborn to leave. We sat like that as the city lights flickered below. Two broken people who'd found something in each other that might have been redemption, or might have been mutual destruction. Either way, there was no going back. I'd walked into the crimson velvet looking for one night of adventure. Instead, I'd found a life so far from my careful plans that I couldn't even see where I'd started from anymore. And somehow, impossibly, I was okay with that.